So how do we get this under control? All right. Well,
Yeah, my first thought is how do you make sure you don't get the blood supply there? That seems like
bingo,
the key.
bingo. If you can actually fortify your body to turn the clock back, keep the blood vessels from growing to the cancer, and strengthen your immune system so the cops on the beat will wipe out more of those bad guys, you're going to be in much better shape than if you
Yes.
just don't know what to do and just don't do anything about it and wait for disaster to strike. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, this is my field. I run the Angiogenesis Foundation. Blood vessels are critical for our livelihood, for our health. We've got 60 miles worth of blood vessels in our body. They're all important they bring the oxygen and nutrients to every cell in our body. However, cancers will hijack that. So can we cut off the blood supply, make it harder for the cancers to grow? Let me take you back a couple of decades to when we were thinking about, because I was part of the pioneering team to do this. Now there are dozens of drugs that can actually do this. But back then, when we were hunting for things, we were looking in natural sources. What does Mother Nature have that can actually help our body cut off the blood supply to cancers like breast cancers? Well, the first one, by the way, was soybeans.
I was just gonna
Amazingly,
say if you soy.
it was soybeans. And I'll tell you the
Yeah.
story. Here's a story that most people don't know. I love to share these little nuggets that people just don't know about. It turns out that there was a young researcher at the time, Ted Fotzis, who had moved from Greece to Switzerland to do research. And when you're a young researcher in a lab, they kind of give you the junior guide, the least interesting stuff to do, and they give you kind of the leftovers. So he got in there, and it was a hormone lab, by the way. It was a
Oh,
lab about
nice.
hormones. And this hormone lab in Switzerland pioneered the ability to look for estrogen in urine, in women's urine. So we're going back to the really late 1970s, early 1980s. All right. And it turns out they gave this young researcher, Ted Fosis, they gave him a crate of old urine samples from women that they didn't want to use anymore. And they're like, here, this is your project. Go figure out something interesting to do with it. So he looked in the urine and he found the estrogen, right? Because these are women.
Mhm.
And what he found, though, when he was analyzing the urine, there was this weird spike that came out of the urine that he'd never seen before. In fact, nobody had actually
Okay.
seen it before. So in the lab, he cut the spike out. This is how you do it. You cut the spike out and you analyze what is a spike. That spike was a natural compound from soy called genistein. And so his lab basically said, so what? You know, because it didn't come from
Right.
humans. Don't forget, this lab was studying human estrogen. And so he
Right.
found this weird estrogen like spike out of women, they cut it out. And they said, well, it didn't come from humans, it didn't come from the women. Where did it come from? It came from soy. So, and they're like, well, tell us that it's useful or don't tell us at all. All right. And so what he did is he actually studied the genistein, which is a phytoestrogen, a plant estrogen, which came from soy. All right. And this is one of the origins to how the whole urban legend about soy being damaging came from, phytoestrogens. And he tested it in the systems used for drug development ultimately to see if he can starve cancer. And when he dropped the soy genistein in there, boom, it knocked out all the blood vessels that, like, for example, a
Wow.
breast cancer in the lab would actually recruit. And he was like, Eureka, wow, that's amazing. All right. And it came from soy, and that led to a research publication that changed everything, including for me, because it led us to understand that foods have natural substances that can cut off the blood supply to cancer. And that's led to my TED Talk and lots of other things that are going on right now. But the origin, the first food that was discovered was soy. Now, let
Oh,
me
that
tell you,
was where it all came from.
that's where it all came from.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
from
Okay.
a hormone lab
See,
in
from a
Switzerland.
woman.
From
It came from a woman.
And it came from a
Really?
woman. Exactly. Exactly. Now, let me just tell you how this urban legend came about that
Yeah,
soy
please.
is actually harmful for breast cancer. So, and you know, it's like so many other things that are out there in the blogosphere, in the social media space, and the rumor mill. I think most urban legends on health come from well-intentioned people who are
Probably.
trying to
Yeah.
put one and one together. And somebody heard that some human breast cancers are estrogen sensitive, and they are. And then that same person also read somewhere that soybeans have something called a phytoestrogen and didn't think about the phyto part, just thought about the estrogen part. And again, well intentioned saying, well, in that case, You don't want to put any estrogen from soy into the woman. And that's where this took off, like this whole idea that
Yeah.
women shouldn't eat soy. But unfortunately, they were wrong because they weren't scientists and they didn't know the data. So this is where, by the way,
Mm.
I think for anybody listening, having partial knowledge really requires you to keep looking for more information and not just take
Yeah.
that halfway mark and say, I'm done, I'm the expert.
Yes.
Because what happened is that if you actually, as a scientist, look at what a phytoestrogen looks like, let's say this is the chemical structure, and look what the human estrogen looks like, they don't look anything alike. If you had one on the left screen and the right screen, they're
Yeah.
completely different. The chemistry looks
Yeah.
completely different. And in fact,
Yeah.
what was since discovered is that the phytoestrogen from soy blocks the human estrogen. It's Mother Nature's tamoxifen. All right. It
Yes.
actually blocks the
Amazing.
growth of breast cancers. Estrogen is responsible for
Yes.
breast cancer. So just completely the opposite. And it starves the cancer. So people would say to me when I was talking about this earlier in my career, they'd say, that's a nice theory, Dr. Lee, but look, I'm a woman. I'm not going to take the chance. All right.
Right.
Well, so what I say is let's look at where the rubber meets the road in people. Let's look at real women with real clinical trials that had only women in it, right? Women with breast cancer. And one of the most famous ones that I talk about is it's the Shanghai Women's Breast Cancer Study, where they studied 5,000 women who were at the highest risk for breast cancer. And you know why they were at the highest risk? Because they already had breast cancer, right?
Ah.
They're at super high risk. And here's what they
Right.
found. They found that the women who ate more soy had lower mortality.
Wow.
Okay, about
Because it's protective.
because it's protective, about 30% lower. And those women who already had their breast cancer removed by surgery and well treated by chemo radiation or hormonal therapy that didn't have any cancer left, those women who ate the most soy over a period of years had a 30% reduction in the chance of breast cancer would come back. All right.
Crazy.
So survival. Now, then the critic goes, and it's fine. I think anybody wanting to have an intelligent conversation got to be open-minded. Ask questions. I always tell people to ask questions. They're like, okay, well, that's one study, even though there's 5,000 people in it, has it been repeated? And what I say is that actually, it's a great question because there are 14 other studies that have come out since. And in
Nice.
14 clinical trials involving women only with breast cancer, in every single study looking at soy intake and breast cancer outcomes, eating soy led to less mortality. And in every study, eating soy led to greater survival. All right.
Amazing.
So this is the rubber meets the road. This is the clinical
Yeah.
part of it. And it's a great example. And I know you wanted to talk about hormones, which is why I wanted to bring up some of the biggest advancements in this field, in the field I work in, and in angiogenesis, came from this hormone lab when it comes to food as medicine.
That's crazy.
Okay, my baby's coming to you. Eat like a girl. You want to know the foods that will support hormones? Guess what? I have them for you already. It's a free giveaway. Just click the link above and I'll send you a list of all the foods that support amazing hormonal health.
We have to talk about soy because I didn't know the backstory. So you just really helped me understand the backstory. Because I was like, why are we walking around like putting other chemicals, really toxic chemicals on our skin and in our body? And yet we're like, nope, no soy. I'm like, soy has a phytoestrogen component to it. And in my clinic, we used to run hormone tests, urinary hormone tests, like thousands of them. And what I saw is women that had the highest diet soy also had the highest amount of 2-OH estrogen metabolite, which is the protective estrogen. So you just cleared up something for me because I've been walking around like, why are we villainizing soy? There's so many other things to villainize, but there's something really helpful in soy that we need to bring back.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to contribute more back matter to help you tell the story as you write it. But I'll tell you, I think that for anybody watching this and listening to this, there is something important that we need to say. We're not talking about generic soy like soy fillers or soy burgers or ultra processed soy, because actually, if you take a look at the fake meat that's out there, the different burgers and hot dogs and weird things that they're making, those are super ultra processed. So soy, unfortunately, has become also an ingredient that is used in an ultra processed state into foods that, are not it's not even arguably anymore. It's very clearly that eating
Yeah.
ultra-processed foods is bad for hormones, bad for cancer
Yes.
risk, bad for metabolism, bad for cardiovascular,
Dementia.
dementia.
Yeah.
So let's be clear when we're talking about the benefits of soy, we're talking about whole sourced soy foods. So edamame, tofu,
Edamame. Yep.
soy milk, not ultra processed. And by the way, people go, well, I don't know how many soy products I can actually eat. There's like 3 of them in my grocery store. What I tell people to do, if you actually have an Asian market nearby you, just search out on your Google Maps, type in Asian market and see where they are. Take a drive out to them one day, just like a field trip, okay? Just explore and go ask somebody where the foods with soybeans are or soy. And they're going to take you in. There are hundreds of soy foods that are around in Asia, right?
Amazing.
And by the way, there's one last thing I need to tell you about the urine that was studied by Ted Fotzis, the samples. They came from a previous study on female hormones from women who were farmers in a village outside of Kyoto, and they were almost all vegetarians. And of the vegetables they were eating was mostly soy-based foods.
Interesting.
All right.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, okay. So do we have other foods that can cut off the blood supply if we look at it through the lens of like breast cancer or ovarian cancer or cervical cancer?
Yeah. So, it's a long laundry list.
Nice.
I created the list of foods in my book, Eat to Beat Disease. Anybody who wants to get a laundry list of foods that can cut off the blood supply to cancer, it's in my book. And I talk about them all the time. So if you come to my YouTube channel or you go to my master classes, you'll actually hear me talk about them quite frequently. But I will tell you some of them. All right. I'll just give you a sampling of them. Tomatoes. Let's throw out the myth about nightshades and lectins. All right. Tree nuts, walnuts, pistachios, almonds, macadamias, pine nuts. They also lower the risk, and they can also cut off the blood supply of cancer. We're also talking about the brassica vegetable family.
Yes.
So we're talking about not just broccoli, the regular broccoli. We're talking about even turnips, which are part of the brassica family, all have sulforaphanes that cut off the blood supply feeding cancer. Berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. Strawberries have something called ellagic acid, cuts off the blood supply to tumors. This is all based on actually research I did years ago with the National Cancer Institute, where we were studying things to cut off the blood supply for breast and other cancers with drugs. And when we threw a strawberry extract in there, boom, like we got a score. We hit a home run.
That's crazy.
And so these are not replacements for your doctor, your oncologist, and not for drug therapy or women's health specialists. But these are things that you can do for yourself that's part of health care. You go to the doctor for sick care. All right. That's how our system is set up. When you go home from the doctor's office, then it switches over to healthcare. We take care of ourselves. This is how the food in our own toolbox for ourselves. Green tea cuts off the blood supply to breast cancer. And by the way, matcha, which is the specific kind of green tea. Have you had matcha? Do you like matcha?
Yeah, I don't like the taste of it, but every time I go out to I live near Air One, which is a really fancy supermarket, I want a matcha drink. I just haven't fallen in love with it.
Maybe this will influence your thinking about it a little bit. Green tea is good for you. And green tea, when you steep a cup of green tea, the polyphenols, the catechins that are naturally present in tea leaves float out because of the hot water into the brew. And then you're sipping the brew and you're actually getting the catechins, the polyphenols in your body. They cut off the blood supply to cancer. All right. That's very, very clear. Now, but you don't get all the catechins out of the tea leaves because, well, you're just soaking. There's still some left. You know how in a sponge, if you just put a sponge in a bucket and fill up the bucket, and even if you empty out the water, the sponge is still going to have some stuff in it, some water in it. You got to squeeze it out, right? So nobody squeezes out all the catechins from their tea leaves when you brew a cup of tea. However, there is something different about matcha. Matcha is green tea, regular green tea, except about 28 days before they harvest it, they put a shade over it, and that actually causes more polyphenols to be produced. So all by itself, there's more polyphenols, more catechins in matcha, just by putting a little covering over it. Then when they harvest it very carefully. Then they, unlike regular tea, which is just drying the tea leaves, here and then selling it, here they dry the tea leaves the whole leaf, and then they pulverize it into a fine powder. So now
Mm,
you get 100% of the polyphenols in the tea
you get
leaf
the
in
whole
matcha,
thing. Yeah.
and you get the dietary fiber from the leaf itself. You got the
Oh,
polyphenols, you
amazing.
got the dietary fiber, you got everything. There's nothing left behind in a tea bag, nothing left behind. It's all there, which is why a
Okay, you have
cup
me
of matcha
convinced.
is really, really dense green. You can't see through it. All right.
No.
And in fact, you whisk it to mix it up and you sip it. And I can tell you, it's really amazing because you get a lot more polyphenol, a lot more cancer-starving stuff out of matcha than you do a cup of green tea.
Yeah, and then if you put soy milk in it, like a good high quality soy milk.
Now you've stacked it in your favor, and you got the dietary fiber from matcha that actually stimulates your gut microbiome. So now you're lowering the
Yep.
inflammation. And there's one last thing that I didn't tell you yet. The last thing about matcha, and this was based on research done by scientists in England, they found that matcha can actually kill breast cancer stem cells.
Oh, wow.
Now, what's a cancer stem cell? Listen, we're all made of stem cells. Like when our dad's sperm met our mom's egg, we're a little ball of cells. Our stem cells are what allowed us to grow a face, ears, heart, lung, fingertips, toenails. All right. So we were all formed out of stem cells. But when we were actually formed and born, all the other stem cells got stored away to repair and
Mm,
regenerate ourselves over the course of our lives when we need to. Now, when cancers form, that mutation where you got the bad guy forming, if it turns into a tumor, that 1 centimeter tumor, a billion cancer cells, a 1 centimeter cancer, the smallest one you can feel, is a billion cancer cells in it, is already fed by 100 million blood vessel cells.
oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
this is why the point you made, Mindy, earlier is so important. Let's prevent it in the first place. Let's
Right.
stop
Yeah.
those blood vessels from forming. Let's shore up the
Yeah.
immune system. These are simple steps that can actually be taken by healthy people. And if you have
Amazing.
cancer, now's the time to, hubba hubba and get with it because this is not something your oncologist is going to be doing for you. This is something you're going to be doing for yourself.
Yes.
And then the researchers that have found that you see what happens is that after you completely treat breast cancer, right, the women who are in remission, thank God I'm in remission, right? The 5 year mark. Unfortunately, about 20% of people who are in remission over 5 years comes back.
Hmm.
Where the heck did that come from? How did that cancer come back? Well, it turns out that cancers also develop stem cells and they can renew themselves. Now, we know this occurs in breast and other cancers. We don't have a medicine that can treat cancer stem cells. There's nothing. I mean, I can tell you, as somebody who's doing therapeutic development for cancer, we ain't got nothing for that. Guess what? Mother
Interesting.
Nature already beat us to the punch because matcha
Of course she did.
can actually kill breast cancer stem cells. Amazing.
Okay, where are my gals that are struggling with hormonal imbalance? Bloated, feeling like you're not making progress with weight loss? You need to add these foods in so that you can support better hormonal health. There is a lifestyle that estrogen wants you to live, and there is a lifestyle that progesterone wants you to live.